The coffin was sliding into the flames when my phone vibrated in my pocket. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was another cruel message of condolence, another hollow, "I'm sorry for your loss." But the glow lit up through the fabric of my suit. Against my will, I pulled it out. My eyes froze. A single text message burned across the screen. "I'm alive. Your wife hides a lover." My throat closed up. My knees nearly gave out in front of my son's casket. My dead son. Or maybe not. My name is Leonard Parker. I'm 59 years old, and people say I carry myself with a certain dignity, as if the world tried to break me 1,000 times and failed. That day, I wasn't sure if it was failing me again, or if it was playing a trick I couldn't yet understand. I should explain. My son Marcus was the pride of my life. He was 28, ambitious, sometimes reckless, but he was mine. 3 weeks before the funeral, the police came to my door, hats in hand, saying there'd been an accident. A car engulfed in flames on the old state highway. No survivors. They told me the remains inside matched his wallet, his watch, his fingerprints. I believed them. What else could I do? A father doesn't question charred bones. A father simply falls apart. And yet, as the pastor's voice droned in the background and smoke began to rise, that message kept repeating itself in my mind. I'm alive. The words sliced through my grief like glass. I looked over at my wife, Eleanor. She sat stiffly, her black hat shading her face. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried once since the accident. People whispered, but I defended her, telling them not everyone grieves the same way. But when I read the second part of the text, "Your wife hides a lover," something inside me cracked. Her lips were pursed. Her hands clutched her purse tighter than a widow should. Had she known? Had she lied? I slipped the phone back into my pocket before anyone noticed, my heart thundering in my chest. I wanted to stand up, stop the service, scream into the room that my son might not even be dead. But what if it was a cruel prank? What if someone wanted to ruin me on the darkest day of my life? I clenched my jaw and swallowed the fire inside me. The ceremony ended. People lined up to hug us, their words heavy and empty. "Stay strong, Leonard. He's in a better place." I nodded politely, shaking hands, hugging shoulders, but all I could think about was the text. Every time I replayed it in my head, my skin prickled with both dread and hope. That night, I sat alone in the living room. The house smelled faintly of lilies and burnt candles from the service. Eleanor had gone to bed without saying much, claiming exhaustion. I pulled my phone out again and stared at the message. No number I recognized, just a string of digits, unregistered. I tapped call back. No answer. Straight to voicemail. I tried again and again. By the third time, my hands were shaking. I whispered to myself, "Marcus, is that you?" At 1:13 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A new text appeared. "Meet me tomorrow at the old diner outside town. Come alone." I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I drove to the diner, my heart pounding with every mile. It was one of those places with peeling paint, a neon sign flickering half dead, the smell of bacon grease forever baked into the walls. I parked my car out front and sat for a moment, staring at the entrance. If my son was alive, if this was real, then everything I thought I knew had just been ripped apart. Inside, the diner was nearly empty. A waitress in a faded pink uniform poured coffee for an old man at the counter. I slid into a booth near the back and waited. My eyes scanned every face or every reflection in the greasy window. Then, a man walked in. He wore a hood pulled low, but his stride, I would know that stride anywhere. Tall, broad shoulders, a slight limp from the time he sprained his ankle in high school football. My chest tightened. "Marcus," I croaked, my voice trembling. The man pulled down his hood, and there he was, my son, alive, flesh and blood. His face was leaner, his eyes sharper, but it was him. "Dad," he whispered, sliding into the booth. I reached out and grabbed his hand across the table. It was warm, real, alive. My vision blurred with tears I hadn't allowed myself in weeks. "I buried you," I said. "I watched them burn your body. How is this possible?" Marcus looked over his shoulder nervously, then leaned closer. It wasn't me in that car. Somebody wanted me gone. And Mom, she's part of it. The word struck me harder than a hammer. Your mother? I whispered. She's not who you think she is, Marcus said, his voice shaking. She's been lying to you for years. She's lying to everyone. My stomach churned. My wife, the woman I had loved for 30 years, the one who shared my bed, my meals, my prayers. Could she really be hiding something so monstrous? Marcus gripped my hand tighter. I'll explain everything, but we can't stay here. It's not safe. Meet me tomorrow night at the church cemetery. Midnight. Bring nobody. Not even her. And just like that, he slipped out of the booth, pulled his hood back up, and disappeared through the door, leaving me sitting there with my coffee untouched, my soul burning with 1,000 questions. I drove home in silence. Eleanor was in the kitchen sipping tea, her face calm, almost too calm. She asked if I'd been out for air. I nodded, lying through my teeth. She smiled faintly, but her eyes didn't match the curve of her lips. That night, lying in bed beside her, I stared at the ceiling, my body rigid, pretending to sleep. I thought about Marcus's words, about the text, about the strange absence of grief in my wife's face. And then, just before dawn, I heard her whispering into her phone in the bathroom, her voice low but urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but I caught one phrase clearly. He doesn't suspect a thing. I woke up the next morning with the weight of a stone pressing on my chest. My wife's side of the bed was already cold. She was always an early riser. But today it felt like her absence carved a hole in the mattress itself. I lay there, staring at the ceiling fan slowly circling, wondering if the night before had been a dream. My son's face, his words, his trembling hands, it all felt too vivid to be a trick of the mind. I swung my legs out of bed and sat for a long while, elbows on my knees, face buried in my palms. A man is supposed to know the truth inside his own home. But at that moment, I realized I was a stranger under my own roof. The smell of frying bacon drifted up from the kitchen. Eleanor was downstairs, humming a tune I couldn't place. Her voice was soft, almost girlish, and yet there was something eerie in its steadiness. I forced myself to descend, every step heavy, rehearsing how to look normal, how to pretend. "Morning, Leonard," she said when I entered the kitchen. She placed a plate of eggs and bacon in front of me with that mechanical smile she'd worn since the funeral. "You didn't sleep well?" Her eyes lingered on mine just long enough to feel like she was searching, probing for something. "I've had better nights," I replied, stabbing at the eggs with my fork. The taste turned to ash in my mouth. She sat across from me, sipping her tea. The silence between us was thick, broken only by the faint ticking of the old wall clock. I wondered if she could hear the racing of my heart. "You should try to rest," she said gently, almost too gently. "Dwelling on things won't bring him back." The words hit like a knife twist. If only she knew what I knew, or maybe she already did. I nodded, pretending agreement, and changed the subject. "I might take a drive today, clear my head." Her eyes flickered, just for a second. "That's good. Fresh air might help." But her hand tightened around the handle of her teacup. A small tremor ran through her fingers. I finished breakfast quickly and retreated to my study. I needed to think. The room was lined with bookshelves and smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. It had always been my refuge, the one place where I could hear myself think. I closed the door and pulled out my phone. The message from Marcus still glowed on the screen, as if daring me to believe. "She's not who you think she is." I began sifting through old memories, searching for cracks I had ignored. Times she stayed late at church meetings, trips to visit her sister that ended with her returning days later, strangely refreshed. And then there was her refusal to cry at Marcus's funeral. Could it all be connected? Or was grief twisting my mind into knots? The thought of Marcus alive filled me with both joy and terror. Joy, because the nightmare of his death might be undone. Terror, Because if he was right, I was living with a woman who had betrayed me on levels I couldn't yet fathom. That afternoon, Eleanor went to the store. The moment the door shut, I sprang into action. I went to her vanity in the bedroom. The drawers were neat, almost obsessively organized, jewelry in boxes, makeup lined up by shade, perfumes arranged in a row. Too neat. I slid my hand under the false bottom of one drawer, a trick I had learned years ago while repairing the furniture. There, hidden in a shallow space, was an envelope. My pulse quickened as I pulled it out. Inside were photographs, not of family, not of vacations. These were of Eleanor with another man. A tall figure, dark hair, always careful to turn his face slightly away from the camera. The photos weren't romantic in the obvious way, no kissing, no embraces, but there was intimacy in the way their shoulders touched, the way her smile bloomed in his presence, brighter than anything she had shown me in years. Alongside the photos was a hotel keycard. The name embossed on it made my stomach churn. It was a hotel just outside the county, a place I had driven by countless times but never entered. My hand shook as I shoved the envelope back and returned everything exactly as I had found it. By the time Eleanor came home, I was back in my study, pretending to read the newspaper. That night, as she prepared for bed, I studied her from across the room, the way she brushed her hair, the way she hummed softly, the way she avoided my eyes. She moved with the composure of a woman confident her secrets were safe. I lay down beside her, but sleep didn't come. At midnight, I slipped out of bed and into the study again. The old floorboards creaked under my weight, but Eleanor didn't stir. I sat in the dark with only the glow of my phone to keep me company. Another text came in at 12:07 a.m. Remember? Cemetery. Tomorrow. Midnight. I typed quickly. I'll be there, but I need proof. If this is real, I need to know everything. The reply was almost instant. You'll have your proof, and you'll see who she really is. The next day passed in a haze. I moved like a ghost through the house. Eleanor noticed my distraction and asked if I was feeling sick. I lied, blaming it on nerves and exhaustion. She nodded but studied me with those sharp eyes, as if she suspected my mind was elsewhere. That evening, just before dinner, I decided to test her. I asked, casually, "Do you ever think Marcus might still be out there? That maybe it was all a mistake?" Her fork froze mid-air. For the first time since the accident, she faltered. Her lips parted slightly, then closed again. Finally, she forced a smile. "Leonard, you can't torture yourself with impossible thoughts. He's gone. You saw the coffin yourself." I stared at her, searching for a flicker of guilt, of panic. But she held my gaze with icy steadiness. "He's gone," she repeated, placing her fork down with finality. Later, after she went to bed, I slipped outside onto the porch. The night air was cool, heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Crickets chirped in the distance. I pulled my jacket tighter and sat in the dark, the weight of truth and lies pressing against my chest. Had she just lied to my face? Or was she truly convinced Marcus was dead? The cemetery meeting loomed ahead like a storm cloud. My hands trembled at the thought of what I might discover. At 11:30 p.m., I drove through empty streets, headlights cutting through the fog. The cemetery gates loomed ahead, iron bars rusted with time. I parked outside and walked in, the crunch of gravel under my shoes echoing in the silence. Rows of headstones stretched before me like silent witnesses. The smell of damp grass and old stone filled the air. My heart pounded so loud I feared it would wake the dead. And then I saw him. Marcus, standing near a mausoleum, his hood pulled up again. He raised a hand in greeting, his eyes darting nervously around. "You came," he whispered when I reached him. "Of course I came," I said, gripping his shoulder. "But I need answers, son. Every second I spend under that roof feels like poison. If your mother is part of this, I need to know the truth." Marcus glanced over his shoulder, then handed me a folded piece of paper. This is the proof. Read it when you're alone. But listen carefully, Dad. She's dangerous. More dangerous than you think. And the man she's with? He's not just a lover. He's the reason they wanted me dead. My blood ran cold. Who is he? I demanded. Before Marcus could answer, a sound broke the night. A twig snapping, footsteps approaching through the fog. Marcus's face went pale. They found us, he hissed, and then he bolted into the darkness, leaving me clutching the folded paper, my heart hammering as shadows moved through the cemetery. The cemetery at night is no place for a man with a weak heart. The silence there is not silence at all. It breathes, it watches, it swells with whispers you can't name. When Marcus vanished into the fog, my body refused to follow. My knees locked, my breath caught, and for a split second I thought I was standing in a dream. But then the crunch of gravel drew nearer, the unmistakable rhythm of footsteps not my own, and reality came crashing back. I stuffed the folded paper into my jacket pocket and pressed myself against the cold stone of the mausoleum. My pulse throbbed in my ears, loud enough to give me away. Whoever was out there moved carefully, deliberately, as though they already knew I was here. A beam of light sliced through the fog, a flashlight. It swept across the graves, pausing, hovering, then moving again. I held my breath as it passed within feet of me, brushing the edge of the mausoleum before sliding on. A man's voice followed, low and gruff, muttering something I couldn't catch. I waited until the beam moved further away, then slipped from my hiding place, crouched low and made for the gates. My shoes crunched too loud on the gravel, betraying me, and the light swung back immediately. "Hey!" the voice barked. I didn't look back. My legs carried me faster than they had in years, the sound of pursuit echoing behind me. Whoever it was gave chase, boots pounding the ground with a soldier's rhythm. I could almost feel their breath at my neck. I burst through the cemetery gates, dove into my car, and slammed the locks down. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the keys. The flashlight's beam hit my windshield just as I started the engine. I floored the gas and shot down the empty road, my tires screaming against the pavement. Only when the town lights flickered in the distance did I allow myself to breathe again. My shirt clung to my back with sweat. My heart felt as though it would rip itself out of my chest. Back home, I pulled into the driveway quietly, praying Eleanor wasn't awake. The house loomed dark, only a faint lamp glowing in the living room window. I slipped inside, shoes in hand, and tiptoed upstairs. Her steady breathing drifted from the bedroom. She was asleep. In my study, I locked the door and finally pulled out the folded paper Marcus had given me. My hands trembled as I smoothed it open. It was a photocopy of an official-looking document, a police report. My eyes raced across the page. The report described an ongoing investigation into a man named Richard Hale. Drug trafficking, money laundering, ties to organized crime. And there, scribbled in the margins in Marcus's handwriting, were two words that made my stomach plummet. Mom involved. I dropped into my chair, the paper fluttering in my lap. My mind reeled. Eleanor, my wife, my church-going, tea-sipping wife, connected to a criminal underworld I had only read about in newspapers. The thought was too grotesque, too absurd, and yet the photos I had found, her secret phone calls, her strange calm at the funeral, they all pointed in the same direction. I read the report again and again, memorizing every detail, until the words blurred before my eyes. At the bottom was a date, 3 months ago. Eleanor had been tied to Richard Hale for at least that long, maybe longer. I wanted to confront her immediately, storm into the bedroom, throw the paper in her face, demand the truth. But Marcus's warning echoed in my head. She's dangerous. So I waited. The next day, Eleanor acted as though nothing was amiss. She watered her gardenias, polished the silverware, chatted politely with neighbors who stopped by to offer condolences. She played the role of grieving mother so well that even I almost believed her performance. Almost. But I watched her differently now. Every gesture, every word carried a second meaning. She checked her phone more than usual. She left the house twice without explanation, claiming errands that took longer than they should. I decided to follow her. That evening, after dinner, she said she was going to the church to arrange flowers for Sunday service. I waited 10 minutes, then slipped into my car and tailed her at a distance. My headlights off, my heart thudding, I tracked her sedan through the winding streets. But she didn't go to the church. She drove past it, out of town, toward the highway. My grip on the steering wheel tightened as she turned down a dimly lit road and pulled into the parking lot of a motel, the same name etched on the keycard I had found in her drawer. I parked far enough away to avoid suspicion and watched. A few minutes later, a man emerged from one of the rooms. Tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair slicked back. Even from a distance, his presence radiated authority, menace. He opened the passenger door for her like a gentleman, but there was nothing gentle about the way he carried himself. Richard Hale. It had to be him. My breath caught in my throat as I watched Eleanor slide into the car beside him. They drove off together, leaving me in the shadows with a storm raging in my chest. I followed again, careful not to be seen. They drove across town to a warehouse district, abandoned except for a few trucks idling outside. Hale's car rolled into one of the warehouses, the door closing behind them. I parked and sat in the dark, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. Rage boiled in me, but so did fear. I was in over my head. My wife was entangled with a criminal, maybe even plotting with him, and my son had nearly been burned alive because of it. I waited an hour, maybe more, until their car finally re-emerged. They drove back to the motel, Eleanor slipping into the room with him like it was her second home. I couldn't watch anymore. My stomach turned, my vision blurred. I drove away before I did something reckless. At home, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat at the kitchen table in the dark. The ice clinked in the glass, loud in the silence. My thoughts churned like a hurricane. How long had she been deceiving me? How deep did this go? When Eleanor returned past midnight, she tiptoed into the house. I listened from the shadows as she went upstairs, humming faintly to herself, as if nothing were wrong. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out Marcus's paper again and read it until dawn. The following day, I met Marcus in secret once more. This time, at an abandoned park near the river. He looked thinner, more haunted, but alive all the same. "You saw her, didn't you?" he asked, reading my face before I spoke. I nodded, unable to form words. "I tried to stay quiet, Dad," Marcus continued, his voice cracking. "I thought if I disappeared, they'd leave me alone, but they set me up. That crash wasn't an accident. Hale wanted me gone because I found out what Mom's been doing. She launders his money. She hides it in her church donations, her charity work, her flower sales. She's his cover." My knees nearly buckled. Marcus grabbed my arm. "We have to act carefully. If she suspects we know, she'll warn him, and then neither of us will live long enough to see justice." I swallowed hard. "What do we do?" Marcus glanced around, then lowered his voice. "I have a flash drive. Proof of everything. Bank transfers, coded messages, surveillance photos. It's enough to put them both away for good. But it's hidden. We need to get it before Hale does." "Where is it?" I asked. He hesitated. "In the house." My blood ran cold. "You mean in my house?" Marcus nodded grimly. "Yes, I hid it there before the crash. I didn't trust anyone else. But Hale suspects, and if Mom figures out what I did, she'll tear the place apart until she finds it." I gripped his shoulder, the weight of truth sinking deeper than ever. My wife was not only a traitor but the key to a dangerous man's empire. And my home, the place I thought safe, was already the battlefield. The strangest thing about knowing your house holds a secret is that suddenly every corner feels hostile. The pictures on the walls, once reminders of family vacations and birthdays, now stared back at me with suspicion. The ticking of the clock was no longer just time passing but a drumbeat of danger, warning me that every second Eleanor might discover I knew. Marcus's words haunted me. I hid it in the house. That meant the war wasn't somewhere out there in the dark city streets. It was here, in the kitchen where Eleanor brewed her morning tea, in the living room where we had once danced to old jazz records, in the bedroom where we shared 3 decades of nights. I came home from my meeting with Marcus with a hollow feeling in my gut. Eleanor was waiting at the door, arms crossed, her lips curled in the faintest of smiles. "You've been out late," she said, voice casual but edged with steel. "Needed air," I replied, brushing past her. Her perfume lingered in the hallway, floral, heavy, suffocating. I wondered if Richard Hale had breathed in that same scent only hours before. My hands curled into fists. She followed me into the kitchen, watching as I poured myself water. "Air helps," she murmured, tilting her head. "But sometimes too much air can make a man dizzy." I froze, glass halfway to my lips. Was that a warning? A test? I forced a chuckle. Maybe so. She smiled again, satisfied, and went upstairs. I stood in the kitchen until my legs threatened to give out. That night, after Eleanor fell asleep, I began my search. The house creaked like it knew I was trespassing. I started in the basement, among the boxes of holiday decorations and old tools. My flashlight beam cut through cobwebs and dust, illuminating relics of a simpler life. Marcus's baseball mitt, Eleanor's sewing machine, a trunk full of clothes that smelled faintly of mothballs. Nothing. I moved to the attic, sweat dripping down my back. The air was thick with insulation and old wood. My hands shook as I opened boxes, flipped through photo albums, lifted piles of blankets. Again, nothing. By 3 a.m., exhausted, I collapsed into my study chair, whispering curses under my breath. Marcus had said the flash drive was here, but the house felt endless, filled with decades of clutter and memories. If Eleanor found me searching, the game would end before it began. The next morning, she noticed my fatigue. "Rough night?" she asked, pouring her tea with the grace of a queen. "Couldn't sleep," I muttered. "You've been restless lately," she said, studying me over the rim of her cup. "You should see a doctor. Stress like this can break a man." Her eyes lingered a moment too long. I looked away before my rage betrayed me. Later that afternoon, while Eleanor ran errands, I returned to the hunt. I searched behind bookshelves, inside hollowed-out drawers, under the floorboards of the study. I grew desperate, ripping through places I had once kept sacred. It wasn't until I reached Marcus's old bedroom that I felt a shift. The room was frozen in time, trophies on the shelf, posters on the wall, his desk cluttered with notebooks and pens. I ran my fingers over the wooden surface, remembering the nights I had scolded him for staying up too late, the mornings I had barged in to drag him out of bed. I pulled open the desk drawers one by one, pens, loose change, scraps of paper. But in the back of the lowest drawer, my hand brushed against something taped to the underside. My heart thundered. Carefully, I peeled it away. A flash drive. My breath caught. I held it in my palm, the weight of truth no bigger than a thumb. This tiny device carried the power to expose everything, to topple Richard Hale and strip Eleanor bare of her lies. But just as I pocketed it, I heard the front door slam. "Leonard?" Eleanor's voice echoed through the house. Panic surged. I shoved the drawer closed and forced myself to breathe. "In here," I called, trying to sound casual. Her footsteps ascended the stairs. She appeared in the doorway, eyes scanning the room. "Nostalgic today?" she asked, leaning against the frame. "Just remembering him," I said softly, gesturing around the room. Her face softened briefly, a flicker of something real, but then her lips curved into that practiced smile. "Memories are powerful," she whispered, "but sometimes they keep us from moving forward." She lingered, her gaze piercing, then turned and walked away. I didn't exhale until I heard her moving downstairs. That night, I locked the flash drive in my desk drawer, hidden under a false bottom she didn't know about. I barely slept, visions of Eleanor discovering it clawing at my mind. The following evening, Marcus called from a burner phone. "Did you find it?" "Yes," I whispered. "Good. Don't plug it in. Not yet. They'll know. Meet me tomorrow at the diner. Bring it." The line went dead. I spent the next day in a haze, every interaction with Eleanor a minefield. At breakfast, she asked if I had plans. At lunch, she suggested we take a drive together. I refused both, claiming headaches. Her smile never faltered, but her eyes narrowed, studying me like a hawk. That night, unable to bear the tension, I poured another glass of whiskey and sat in the darkened study. My hands itched to see what was on the drive, but Marcus's warning held me back. If Hale had the kind of reach Marcus claimed, plugging it into my computer could be the same as signing my death warrant. Suddenly, footsteps creaked on the stairs. The doorknob rattled. "Leonard?" Eleanor's voice was soft, sweet. "Are you awake?" I shoved the whiskey aside, unlocking the door. "Yes," I said, forcing calm. She slipped inside in her nightgown, her perfume wrapping around me like smoke. She sat on the edge of my desk, crossing her legs, studying me with an almost playful expression. "You've been distant?" she murmured. "Grief does that," I replied. She tilted her head. "Does it? Or is there something else on your mind?" Her hand reached out, brushing mine. Her touch sent a shiver down my spine, not of desire but of dread. For years, I had trusted this woman with my life. Now every caress felt like the stroke of a viper. I pulled my hand away gently. "I'm tired." Her smile faltered for the first time. She rose slowly, her eyes locked on mine. "Sleep well, Leonard," she whispered, her tone laced with something I couldn't place. Warning, perhaps, or suspicion. When she left, I locked the door behind her and sat trembling until dawn. The next morning, before Eleanor woke, I retrieved the flash drive and slipped it into my pocket. My meeting with Marcus would change everything. Either we'd expose the truth or die trying. But when I arrived at the diner, Marcus wasn't there. I waited an hour, nursing a cold coffee, scanning every face that walked through the door. No Marcus. My gut twisted. Had they caught him? Finally, the waitress approached. "Are you Leonard?" My heart froze. "Yes." She handed me a napkin folded twice. "A young man left this for you. Said you'd understand." I unfolded it with trembling hands. Scrawled in Marcus's handwriting were 4 words. "They're watching. Be careful." My stomach dropped. I shoved the napkin into my pocket and paid the bill, leaving the diner with my head spinning. Driving home, paranoia clawed at me. Every car behind me felt like a tail. Every pedestrian felt like a spy. By the time I reached the house, I was drenched in sweat. Eleanor was waiting in the living room, sitting calmly with her tea. She looked up as I entered, her eyes sharp, knowing. "Long morning?" she asked. I forced a smile. "Just errands." Her gaze lingered. "Errands," she repeated softly, as though tasting the word. For the first time, I knew with certainty she suspected, and in her suspicion lay my death sentence. I didn't sleep the night after Hale walked out of my house with that grin that smelled like sulfur. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, listening to Angela breathe beside me. Her chest rose and fell in the rhythm of someone at peace, or at least someone practiced at pretending. The contrast of her calm with the storm in my skull almost broke me. At dawn eyes, when the first smear of gray light slipped through the blinds, I told myself, today is the day the pretending ends. Angela rose before me, as always, slipping into her robe with quiet grace. She tied the sash and glanced at me. "You're awake early," she said, her voice smooth. "Couldn't sleep." "Too much on your mind?" she asked, pouring water into the kettle. The hiss of the gas stove filled the kitchen. Always, I muttered. She placed a hand on my shoulder, the gesture as intimate as it was menacing now. You'll make yourself sick if you keep carrying weight that isn't yours. I wanted to laugh in her face, but the sound caught in my throat. Instead, I stared at her hand, the same hand that had stroked Marcus's head when he was a child, the same hand that had scribbled donation tallies for the church fund, the same hand that had hidden her lover's hotel key. She withdrew and went to butter her toast. I excused myself and slipped into my study, locking the door. The flash drive sat under the false bottom of my drawer, warm to my imagination. I pressed my fingers against the wood above it and whispered to myself, "This is the blade they'll never expect." By noon, Marcus called from a new burner. His voice was ragged, but his spirit burned. "Dad, we need to move fast." Hale's tightening his grip. He's got eyes on the house. You can't sit still. He came yesterday, I told him. Sat in our living room, sipped our whiskey like it belonged to him. He gave us 24 hours. Then he'll come tomorrow ready to take everything. We need to use the drive. Police are compromised, I said. Your mother warned me. Maybe she was saving her own skin, maybe not. But she wasn't lying about that. There's one detective, Marcus said. Friend of mine from college. Terry Mendoza. He owes me. I helped him get through night classes when he was drowning. He's straight. If anyone can run with this, it's him. I rubbed my temples. Straight men still bleed. So do we, Marcus said. At least he'd bleed on the right side. We agreed to meet that evening. When I hung up, I heard the faintest creak outside the study door. I opened it. Angela was standing there, carrying a laundry basket, eyes steady. You talk in your sleep now? She asked. I don't. You do. Loud enough I worry the neighbors will ask questions. I brushed past her without answering, but my skin prickled. Did she know about Marcus? Did she hear his voice? Her calmness was a mask too well fitted. That afternoon, she dressed carefully. Black slacks, cream blouse, pearls, not morning attire, not casual either. She looked like a woman headed to negotiate. Going out, I asked. Bible study, she replied. I smiled faintly. They ever read the parts about Judas? Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing, just adjusted her blouse and left. The moment her car pulled away, I called Marcus back. House is clear for now. Come fast. He arrived 20 minutes later, limping but determined, his hood pulled low. I hugged him the way a man hugs a miracle, tight, fierce, terrified of letting go. Let's see it, he said. I retrieved the flash drive from the drawer and placed it on the desk between us. He stared at it like it was a relic. This has to end him, Dad, it has to. Then we'll make sure it does. Before we could plan further, headlights swept across the window. My chest seized. Angela's car. She was back too soon. Hide, I hissed. Marcus slipped into the closet just as the front door opened. Angela's heels clicked against the hardwood, steady and unhurried. She entered the study without knocking. You lock your door now, she said, eyeing the bolt. Old habit, I muttered. From when? I shrugged. From now. She circled the room slowly, fingers brushing books, the globe in the corner, the whiskey decanter. She stopped at the desk, placed both hands on it, and leaned close to me. I know you're planning something, she whispered. I forced a frown. Planning to survive my grief? Her eyes burned through me. Then, with a sudden movement, she opened the drawer I just emptied. Empty. She looked back at me, a smile twitching at her lips. You've gotten clever, she said softly. But clever men often forget who really knows them. She left the room without another word. The silence she left was worse than a scream. Marcus slipped out of the closet, pale. She suspects, he said. She knows. I corrected. We had no more time. We copied the contents of the flash drive onto a second stick Marcus brought, hiding it inside the lining of his shoe. Then we decided, tomorrow, we'd deliver it to Mendoza. Tonight, we'd keep breathing, but fate does not wait for appointments. At midnight, the doorbell rang, 3 times, slow, deliberate. I froze in my chair. Angela appeared at the top of the stairs, robe tied tight, face unreadable. "Who is it?" I asked. She didn't answer. I opened the door. Hale stood there, hands in his coat pockets, smiling like the devil on his day off. 2 men flanked him, heavier, meaner. "Evening, Mr. Brooks," Hale said. "We thought we'd come a little early. Deadlines are flexible when you write them." Angela descended the stairs gracefully. "You weren't expected tonight." "Surprises keep the blood lively," Hale said. "May we come in?" I didn't answer, but the men stepped past me anyway. Hale wandered into the living room, admiring the piano, the stripped mantel. "Cozy," he said. "Family homes always smell of ghosts." He turned, his smile dropping. "Where is it?" I crossed my arms. "Safe." Not the answer I wanted. He nodded to one of his men who began upstairs. The other moved toward the study. My fists clenched, but Marcus emerged from the kitchen, hood down, pistol raised. "Stop," he said, his voice steady. The room froze. Hale's smile returned, sharper now. "Well, the prodigal lives. How poetic." "Step back," Marcus ordered. Angela's eyes darted between her son and Hale. For the first time, I saw her mask crack. Fear flickered. "Son," Hale said, his tone fatherly. "You're in over your head. Guns are loud, messy. You don't want your hands dirty with something you can't wash off." Marcus's grip tightened. "I already carry your dirt. You tried to burn me alive." The room vibrated with silence. Then Hale laughed. "I admire your spirit. You'll make a fine corpse if you're not careful." Angela stepped forward. "Richard," she said sharply. "Enough." The men looked at her, surprised. Hale tilted his head. "Careful, Angela. You forget your place." "I forget nothing," she snapped. "But you forget that I've been the one keeping you clean. Without me, your empire rots in a week." Marcus glanced at me, eyes wide. The truth lay naked now. She wasn't just his accomplice. She was his partner. Hale studied her, then shrugged. "Perhaps, but partners are replaceable." Before he could order the men forward, I spoke. "You want the drive? You'll get it. But only if you walk out of this house alive." Hale chuckled. "That's always my preference." "Tomorrow, noon, public place. No guns, no shadows. You bring nothing but your arrogance, Coz, and I bring the drive. You get it in your hand when I say the word grapefruit. No sooner. If you don't like it, you get nothing." His eyes narrowed. He considered. Then he laughed again. "Clever. Principal Brooks. Very clever." He signaled to his men. "Let them have their night. Tomorrow we finish this." They left as swiftly as they came, the door closing with finality. The house was silent again. Marcus lowered the gun, his hand trembling now. Angela sank into the couch, burying her face in her hands. "What have you done?" I asked her. She looked up, eyes wet. "Survived. That's all I've ever done. I was tired of scraps. Richard offered me a feast." "At the cost of your son?" I shouted. She flinched, then whispered, "I thought they'd scare him. I didn't know they'd try to kill him." "You knew enough," Marcus spat. The 3 of us sat in the dark living room, the piano looming like a silent witness. Finally I stood. "Tomorrow we end this, one way or another." I turned to Marcus. "Pack a bag. We won't sleep here tonight." Angela rose. "Where will you go?" "Where you can't follow," I said. We left her there, a queen without a crown, staring at the piano as though it might play her absolution. The night we left Angela behind in that living room was the night I realized a house can be just as haunted while its occupants are alive as when they're dead. Marcus and I didn't speak much as we drove to the edge of town, the dark road swallowing our headlights. He leaned against the window, bruises fading into shadows, his chest rising in shallow rhythm. Every so often, I caught him staring at the flash drive clenched in my hand. He didn't ask to hold it. He knew I needed to feel its weight, to believe the proof was mine to command. We stayed in an old roadside motel, the kind with flickering neon and carpets that smelled like cigarettes ground into cheap fabric. Marcus collapsed on the bed, his exhaustion heavier than his frame. I sat in the armchair by the window, the drive in my palm, my father's pistol on the table, and a whiskey bottle borrowed from the vending machine's cousin. I didn't drink much, just enough to keep the ghosts at arm's length. Sleep hovered near me like a stranger waiting for permission, but never crossed the threshold. At dawn, Marcus stirred. "We doing this?" "We have no choice," I said. He sat up slowly, grimacing at the pull in his ribs. "Dad, if anything happens to me," I raised a hand. "Don't. You're alive now. That's all that matters. We get through today, you stay alive, and we make sure he doesn't." He nodded, swallowing his fear with a courage that made me proud and broke me all at once. By 9, my phone buzzed. A text from Hale. "Noon. Harrison Park. Bring it." I showed it to Marcus. His jaw clenched. "Open ground." "Public," I said. "Less blood." "Unless he owns the crowd. Then we make the crowd his witness." We left the motel at 10, the flash drive tucked into my breast pocket, the pistol hidden in my jacket, and a second decoy drive in Marcus's shoe. We didn't talk much during the drive. Words felt fragile, and the silence felt safer. Harrison Park lay in the center of town, a wide field with a fountain at its heart, benches scattered like chess pieces, children running in the distance with kites. It looked harmless, the way a snake looks like a rope until it moves. Hale was already there, sitting on a bench near the fountain, 2 men behind him pretending to feed pigeons. Angela sat beside him. My chest tightened at the sight of her. She wore a gray coat, her pearls still around her neck, but her face looked worn, like paper that had been folded too many times. When she saw us, her eyes widened, wet already. She whispered something to Hale. He didn't move. We approached slowly. My shoes crunched against the gravel path, each step louder than the children's laughter in the distance. Hale rose with a smile. Arms spread. "The Brooks men," he said, his voice carrying. "How noble, how punctual." "Harrison Park doesn't belong to you," I said. "Keep your voice down. Families are watching." "Families always watch," he replied, his grin sharp, "and they always look away when told." Angela stood, trembling. "Calvin, Marcus, please." Marcus shot her a look sharp enough to cut glass. "Not now, Mom." I pulled the flash drive from my pocket and held it up. "Here it is." Hale's eyes glowed. He stepped forward, hand outstretched like a priest expecting an offering. "And here I am." "Not yet," I said. "We do this clean. You send a message right now to your people. Proof of life. You say the word grapefruit. If I don't hear it, this drive never touches your hand." His smile faltered. Then he chuckled. "You do love that word." He pulled out his phone, dialed OR, and put it on speaker. A man answered. Hale said smoothly, "Our friend Marcus is with us." "Grapefruit." I exhaled slowly. He was willing to play. For now. "Now," Hale said. Palm open again. I stepped closer, close enough to see the scar near his temple, close enough to smell the faint cologne that couldn't mask the stench of smoke clinging to him. I held the drive between us. And then, instead of handing it to him, I dropped it into the fountain. It sank with a faint plop, vanishing in the rippling water. Hale's eyes widened, then narrowed to slits. "You bastard." "Evidence doesn't need to survive in your hands," I said. "We made copies, 3 of them. By now, one is already in Detective Mendoza's inbox. Another is with a lawyer who hates men like you more than taxes. This drive was just the bait." Hale's face contorted with rage. His men rose from their benches, reaching inside their jackets. But before they could draw, Marcus raised the pistol, aiming square at Hale's chest. "Sit down," Marcus barked. Families nearby noticed now. A mother screamed, dragging her child behind a bench. People scattered. Phones came out recording. Suddenly, Hale was not a king in shadows, but a cornered man in daylight. "You won't shoot me here," Hale sneered. "You're not killers. You're school teachers and sons with asthma. You don't have the steel." I stepped beside Marcus, my voice low but clear. "You tried to burn my boy alive. You brought my wife into your bed and into your business. You sat in my home like you owned it. Tell me again I don't have the steel." Angela sobbed now, collapsing onto the bench, her hands shaking. "Stop it. All of you. Please." Hale's men froze, uncertain with all the cameras pointed at them. Hale himself straightened, smoothing his jacket, forcing a smile. "You've made noise today, Mr. Brooks. Noise fades. But deals last." "There is no deal," I said. "You've already lost." I nodded to Marcus. Together we backed away, keeping the pistol steady. Hale didn't move. The crowd's whispers swelled, a sea of eyes and lenses. We reached the car, slid inside, and sped off before the police could even arrive. My hands shook on the wheel, adrenaline burning me from the inside. Marcus lowered the gun and let out a shaky laugh that turned into a sob. "We did it," he whispered. "Not yet," I said. "We have to make sure Mendoza gets the proof, makes it public. Hale won't stop unless the whole world is watching." We drove straight to the precinct. Detective Terry Mendoza met us in a side entrance, his tie crooked, his eyes wary. He was younger than me but carried himself like an old soldier. Marcus handed him the second flash drive. "Everything's here," Marcus said. "Money laundering, names, accounts, connections. Enough to bury Hale and anyone shielding him." Mendoza plugged it into his laptop. His eyes widened as the files opened. "Jesus," he muttered. This is dynamite." "Use it," I said. "Don't sit on it. Don't let anyone bury it." He looked up at me, then at Marcus. "You're trusting me with your lives." "We already did that when we walked in here," I replied. Mendoza nodded. "I'll move fast. You two, stay invisible for a while. This storm's about to hit." We left the precinct under cover of dusk, hearts pounding but lighter somehow. That night, back at the motel, Marcus finally slept like a man whose nightmares had been evicted. I sat by the window, staring at the highway lights, wondering if Angela was still in our house, waiting for Hale, or if she'd already run. My chest ached with betrayal, but also with the memory of the woman she once was, the woman who laughed with me at church picnics, who whispered to Marcus when he had fevers, who once told me I was the only steady thing in her storm. Maybe that woman was buried under ambition and fear. Maybe she never existed at all. At midnight, my phone buzzed. A news alert. Businessman Richard Hale arrested in Fairfax Park after confrontation. Evidence of large-scale laundering uncovered. I read it twice and 3 times. My hands shook. For the first time in weeks, I let my breath go all the way down. In the morning, Marcus stirred and looked at me. "It's over." "Not over," I said, "but ending." He nodded, relief and sorrow mixing in his eyes. "What about Mom?" I looked out at the rising sun. Some prisons burn. Some are made of paper. She built hers. Now she has to live in it. Marcus leaned back, closing his eyes. "And us." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "We keep walking. We don't stop. We don't hide anymore." The room was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioner. My chest felt both hollow and full. "And to you, listening to my story," I ask, "would you have done the same? If betrayal lived in your home, if danger held your child's throat, would you stand still? Or would you fight with everything you had left? Share your city in the comments. I want to know where men and women like me are still standing. still surviving, still daring to fight. Because I am Calvin Brooks. I am 58, and I have learned that vengeance is only another word for justice that refuses to wait.